Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and we're going to continue our talk with J.R. Van Hoos about Carr Creek and their uniqueness in the 14th region. The other thing that kind of makes this Carr Creek such a special school, or the legacy of Carr Creek, if you want to continue with that a description, they won the state championship in 1956, and they're the last team from the 14th region to win a state championship. Now, my wife is from Perry County. My wife's uncle, Shannon Hoskins, is the coach of Perry County Central. Perry County typically has a pretty good team. Hazard has good teams as well. But has there been anybody close since then that has been able or been even close to winning a state title
from the 14th region?
Yeah.
Well, not County Central's had some good teams. Hazard had some really good teams in the 1980s and the 1990s. But I don't think I'm pretty sure there's not been a 14th region team make the state championship game since. But there's been opportunities. And listen, basketball's like any other sport. You have to have a lot of luck. Of course, you have to be good, essentially. You have to have good teams. But you have to have a lot of luck, man, when you're playing in the state tournament. It just depends on the teams that you're playing. How you're playing at that time. And I mean, there's just all kinds of other factors. But there's been some good teams to come out of the 14th region. They've just not lucked into that opportunity to get, to where Carr Creek did. And I mean, you almost need as much luck as you do talent on the court. Just depending. I mean, and it can be any kind of factor. The referees that are calling the game, are they calling it close? Are they letting you play? What team are you playing? What style are they? Are you successful against the style that they're playing? Are you playing good at that particular time? It takes a lot of talent, of course, but you have to have some luck too. You definitely
one bad game can,
Oh yeah, I mean, you could have a star player who was dominated all year, and the one bad game he has is in the state tournament, and you don't win.
Yeah.
You don't win that opportunity, and there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes it just happens.
Well, and talking about little UK basketball. I mean, it's inevitable, I guess, if you're talking about Kentucky basketball. I think of the undefeated team. Was it 2016? And they got beat by Wisconsin.
Yeah,
Pat lost game. How hard is it to win every game?
yeah. I mean that's hard in itself, and
Yeah.
because I think as players, you're going to lose games.
Yeah.
And I think when you don't lose games, you're, at least in my mindset anyway, I would always be thinking in the back of my head, is this game going to be the one that we lose? And you can't play like that. You can't worry about losing games. You just have to go out there and play your best. And so that added pressure of having not lost, you're just waiting for that loss to happen, and you just hope it doesn't happen in one of these big games,
Yeah, well, I've heard the people say before, it's good to lose one now instead of in the tournament.
I've always heard that. I hate losing games, but that could be true. I mean, you have to be able to deal with that adversity.
Yeah. So we've hinted around to it. We mentioned it in 1956. Carr Creek goes to the state championship and wins the title. I'm going to say these players' names. Like we mentioned before, Morton Combs was the coach. Willard Johnson was the assistant coach. Warren Ambergy, which when I look at all these, there's quite a bit of players. They had a lot of players. But they probably were also from probably just about all the boys in the school. Ed Richardson, John C. Mullins, Ray Stamper, Bobby Shepard, James Higgins, Freddie Maggard, Marcus Combs, Estel Adams, Jim Calhoun, E.A. Couch. Did I say that right? Don Williams, W.B. Smith, Edward Watts, Lewis Cornett, Tyler Cornett. Don Combs was the manager, and so was Donald Hilton. That's just the list of the players. The big name in that one. Who was the big player? Was it? I remember reading it. Now it's. I know Maggard was a starter.
I think most people know of at least the starting five, which was Warren Ambergy, Jim Calhoun, E.A. Couch, Freddie Maggard, and Bobby Shepard. Because those are the ones. I think those are the guys that. I mean, I know those are guys that played the most minutes, and those are the guys I think that people recognize name-wise, just because of things that they not only did at Carr Creek, but things they did in basketball after they left high school.
And the games were very well followed. I mean, you can find newspaper articles and everything talking about the state championship games. How people, like you said, TV was not necessarily in the 50s was definitely more available than the 20s, but people packed into the stadiums, and because the state tournament was in Lexington, it packed in. Was it Memorial Coliseum? I believe they had the state tournaments, and not everybody. There wasn't room for everybody, so people would gather at the bars, restaurants, and listen to the game as well. And it was quite a big spectacle. And Carr Creek winning was a huge deal.
Yeah, like you said, we talked about TV earlier. The Louisville Courier and the Lexington Herald, the two biggest newspapers in the state at that time, definitely had great coverage of high school basketball in Kentucky at that time. And and I don't think a lot of people realize, but Carr Creek had a good team before 1956. The year before, in 1955, they got beaten in the region tournament by Hazard. Hazard went on to win the state tournament in 1955. Johnny Cox, who was an All-American at Kentucky, was a senior at Hazard that year. And so, Carr Creek, Morton Combs, I think, even said that he thought his best team was the 1955 team that didn't even make the state tournament. They got beat by the state champion in the region tournament, Hazard. And so being able to go the next year and win the state tournament, I mean, that's pretty impressive. And the 1950s, man, we're talking about a time now. That was, I would definitely call it the golden age of basketball in Eastern Kentucky. I know Carr Creek won in 1956. I just mentioned Hazard won in 1955. Inez, a 15th region team, won in 1954. So, you have 3 straight state champions from Eastern Kentucky in the 1950s. And not only that, but, the players. I just talked about Johnny Cox. You got King Kelly Coleman at Wayland. You have all of these famous, well-known high school basketball players that are coming out of Eastern Kentucky in the 1950s, and these teams as well. It's just, I call it the golden age of basketball in Eastern Kentucky. How many sections of the state are going to have 3 straight state champions from different schools? Just different schools, not even one school, but different schools. And so, that's just when you look at those records and those players and the teams, it's pretty impressive. The 1950s.
That's really impressive, and to think about. So many big names coming out of there, and but you mentioned King Kelly Coleman, which he played Carr Creek. Well, who did he play for again?
He played for Wayland. Wayland's in Floyd County. Wayland is probably. To drive from Wayland to Carr Creek today, it'd probably take you 30, 40 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. But, everybody's heard of King Kelly Coleman. He could be a whole nother episode, on the podcast. But, King Kelly and Carr Creek, they had a bit of a rivalry. They actually played early in the 1955-56 season. I think Wayland won that game. And then they meet up. These 2 schools that are fairly close together, they meet up in the semifinals of the state tournament that year as well. And, these schools in Eastern Kentucky, the ones that were successful, they played each other. And so there was that growing rivalry among those schools. And, when you talk about Carr Creek getting to the state tournament, the first game they played in the state tournament was against Central City. And Central City, this was, I think 1956 was like their 4th straight appearance in the state tournament.
Wow.
They came out of the 2nd region. They were led by a great player. He's one of my very good friends today. His name's Corky Withrow, who was a high school All-American at Central City and actually played Major League Baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals. Wow. And it's funny, I joke with him all the time. He got Central City as good as they were. They got beat in the first round. Every state tournament, every 4 years, each of the 4 years they played in the state tournament. And they lost to 2 state champions. Inez beat them in 1954, and Carr Creek beat them in 1956. So,
wow. And if people are wondering, Central City is Muhlenberg County. So, Western Kentucky.
And even that Central City Carr Creek game, it was a close game. I think Freddie Maggard hit a shot right there at the end of the game to win. And so, like I said, we talked about being lucky in the state tournament. Central City, who was a powerhouse. They were a powerhouse in Western Kentucky. To lose 4 straight times in the first round of the state tournament, it's just unlucky. Just unlucky. Just unlucky. Yeah.
Well, and you look at if you had to pick, I know this is probably a hard one to do on the spot, and just in hindsight and so forth, but if you had to pick one person to be like the main player of Carr Creek, me personally, I would say Freddie Maggard, because he hit, like you said, the last second shot with Central City, and I believe another one.
Yeah, he hit another one against Wayland. Kelly Coleman. Yeah.
So, and if I'm doing the math right in my head, there's 4 games, right? So that was the first round game, and then I think Carr Creek won pretty handily the second.
They did. Round. I looked at the score the other evening. I know they played Allen County, and I think the score was 69-45. It was their easiest victory of the state tournament, that second round game. Yeah. But the Central City game, their first game, was very close. They won in overtime by 2 points. The second round game against Allen County, not very close. And then they're playing against the tournament favorite in the semifinals. I mean, King Kelly Coleman, Wayland. This is the 1956 state tournament. When people talk about that, it was King Kelly's state tournament. He had, for 4 years, he had put on this unbelievable display of scoring. He was averaging, as a senior, he's averaging like 45, 46 points a game, something astronomical. And even, when Wayland, before they played their first state tournament game that year in 1956, an airplane drops leaflets over Lexington, and it says, like, King Kelly Coleman is here, like the king is coming. I mean, can you imagine being 17 years old and, like, you got leaflets being dropped, talking about, he's the greatest scorer of all time. Adolph Rupp calls him the greatest high school basketball player of all time. And so, I mean, this was Wayland's chance to win a state title. Everybody thought Wayland was going to do it. I mean, they've got the greatest scorer in history. And so, I think Jim Calhoun from Carr Creek was assigned to guard King Kelly. And the newspaper said he shut him down. King Kelly only had 28 points. 28 points is a pretty good game. That's a fantastic game for most players. But Carr Creek wins. Freddie Maggard hits a shot, I think, right at the buzzer. And Carr Creek wins by a point, 68-67. And, and people talk about King Kelly, having 28 points, but a lot of people don't realize he also had 28 rebounds that game as well, which is still a state tournament record. So, I mean, for people to say, that King Kelly got shut down, he only had 28 points. I mean, he also had 28 rebounds too. I mean, that's a pretty good game. That's a fantastic game. But again, Carr Creek was lucky. They hit a shot at the buzzer, puts them in the state championship game. And so, I hope people can see it's like football, they say, is a game of inches. So is basketball. A shot here, a free throw there. That could cost you or win you the game at some point. And so Carr Creek they lived right. They've lived right in 2 games. They've hit 2 buzzer beating shots to advance into the state championship game. Yeah, and that's
it's a pretty interesting, pretty miraculous to say. Like you said, it's luck, talent, coaching. It all goes in at one. And if it hits at the right moment, you can.
Yeah, and people. I think people have to realize too. These are kids, 17, 18-year-old kids. I mean, if they miss a shot, what? How do they feel? Their team's lost. They've not been able to advance in the state tournament. But then you you're the person that hits a shot. You're the hero. You're this legend all of a sudden, and nothing's really changed about you. All you did was hit a shot that you've probably hit thousands of times before in practice.
In many games and many practices, but this one was
you just different. Hit one that actually it really mattered this time. It was a little bit more pressure for you. But
I think
and then Carr Creek goes on to beat Henderson in the finals. I think it was a 4-point game, 72-68, I believe is what the score was. And Carr Creek, they won the state title that they didn't win in 1928. They finished it in 1956.
Yeah, and you talking about the players. Think about King Kelly Coleman. I mean, he got 28 points, but he needed 3 more. I mean,
I mean, that's about as. I mean, that's the easiest way to put it. Yeah, 2 more, 3 more. I mean, if he'd have made 1 more basket, or if one of his teammates would have made 1 more basket, or if Freddie Maggard would have missed the shot at the end, people wouldn't be talking about Carr Creek. They'd probably be talking about Wayland.
Yep. So they beat Henderson in the finals, becoming the state champions, the last state champions from the 14th region. Pretty wild run. I mean, people were pretty excited and celebrated quite a bit about it. They were, they enjoyed it. So
and we've talked about legacy a lot, and I think about what I've seen. Freddie Maggard has said before, he talked about being a young kid, and I think he said something about he had an oatmeal box in his room, and he cut the bottom out of it and like taped it or nailed it to his wall, and he had like a foam ball, and he would just shoot at a basket. And so,
Wow.
and I think his inspiration came from that 1928 Carr Creek team. You know, he had seen what and he wanted to be a basketball player.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they become basketball players, and they do this, and then they inspire younger
Another
kids
generation.
to, and you know, some of these guys like E.A. Couch, you know, he had two sons. David Couch played at West Point, played basketball at West Point when Coach K was the head coach at West Point.
Yeah, wow.
And, you know, Joey Couch played at Paintsville High School, played in 3 state tournaments for the coach that I played for in high school. And so, you know, Joey Couch's group that won 3 region tournaments in the 80s inspired my generation to, hey, if those guys can do it, we can do it too. And, you know, we end up winning a state championship. So, you know, that Carr Creek legacy from the 50s, you know, I'm sure Joey was inspired by his dad and his uncle who played on that Carr Creek team. Mm-hmm. We were inspired by Joey and John Pelfrey and those guys at Paintsville in the 80s. And, you know, here we are doing similar things in the state tournament in the 90s. And so, I mean, that, you know, it's a generational thing for us.
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this book, but like the Carr Creek book, and Don Miller, like that was one of the things he said, I believe in the book, you know, he was inspired by the state championship team, you know, and he came in and, you know, they still had good teams. They had good teams up until, you know, up until Carr Creek closed. It wasn't just only the one state championship, but not just one, and it wasn't just a one and done. Nobody ever talked about Carr Creek anymore. They were still relevant for many years.
Yeah, and you know, that legacy, I just feel like it's really important because, you know, if those guys from the Carr Creek 56 team were inspired by those guys on the 28 team, and then, you know, who knows who the 56 team inspired? You know, I know they inspired a generation of kids that played in the 70s and 80s that inspired my generation to do, you know, the things that we did. And so, I mean, it's like that connection. And I think that's why basketball in Eastern Kentucky is special. You know, when people tell you you can't do something because, you know, you're just a mountain kid or whatever, I mean, that's really not true. You can look back and see that the guys before, you know, people before you, players before you have done all of these things, and you just take it upon yourself to want to do that and accomplish the goals that they did because you know it's possible. And, you know, I'm sure, you know, my group in the 90s inspired kids in Paintsville that won a region title in 2008, you know, and then you have Shelby Valley who wins a state championship from the 15th region in 2010. You know, I'm sure they realized that they could do that because of things that we had done a few years before. And so, I mean, it's like a never-ending process that I think is pretty cool when you can tie all that stuff in together and actually see the history unfold, you know, as it does. And I think that's what makes basketball in Eastern Kentucky special. I mean, you know, in 2010, I can remember when Shelby Valley was playing in the state championship game against Louisville Ballard, I was cheering for them. I mean, I knew what it felt like to be in that and to have I had no dog in the fight, so to speak. I didn't have to cheer for them, but I wanted to. You know, that's mountain kids and they're trying to achieve a goal. I know what that's like. So it was, I mean, it was pretty special.
Well, so let's look at some of these players. I know we mentioned a few of them, but like, let's just start with Freddie Maggard. After Carr Creek, what did he end up doing?
Well, you know, Freddie's son, Fred Maggard, you know, he was quarterback at Kentucky in the 1980s. He was roommates with Joey Couch. Joey Couch was from Paintsville, played football at Kentucky, who was E.A. Couch's son. And so, you know, these 2 former teammates, their sons were roommates as they played football together at Kentucky, which I think is pretty neat. That's a pretty good connection. But E.A. Couch, he marries a cheerleader who just happened to be the sister of Jim Calhoun, who was on the on the Carr Creek
On the
team.
team.
So Jim Calhoun and EA Couch became brother-in-laws, and EA and EA played freshman basketball at UK, and then transferred and finished his career at Dayton as a basketball player, which, I don't think a lot of people know that. Jim Calhoun, he won 2 national titles as a player at Cincinnati in the early 1960s. Yeah. So he finished his basketball career at Cincinnati. Bobby Shepard, he actually played freshman basketball at Kentucky and then transferred to Lamar, which is now Lamar University in Texas. He was an all-conference player there. Career at Lamar in Texas. And so a lot of these guys went on to do some pretty amazing things after high school. I mean, you got national champions and, guys who have played freshman basketball at Kentucky, and then they have a generation of kids who go on to play, football at Kentucky. And EA Couch had another son, as I mentioned, his son David played basketball at West Point for Coach Krzyzewski, who's now finishing his career at Duke. And so, yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see what these guys accomplished after high school, and then tying their kids to some athletic success in that next generation as well. So it's Carr Creek, man, I'm telling you, we talked about it at the beginning. The 28 team, I think, did a lot for basketball in Eastern Kentucky, and the 56 team just capitalized on that, and influenced generations of players. Not only myself, but Joey Couch, who played at Paintsville in the 80s with John Pelfrey at Paintsville, and so many others. I mean, there's so many great teams you could talk about from Eastern Kentucky. Wayland, even though they didn't win a state championship, I mean, King Kelly Coleman is. I mean, he's the legend. I mean, people still talk about him. People still talk about him. I got to be great friends with him before he passed away a few years ago, and it's just when you sit with the man, it's amazing to think of everything he accomplished in his high school career. And getting to meet EA Couch and who played at Carr Creek, and being inspired by his son, and I mean, it's just I don't know if I've really put into words what that legacy really means to myself, just being a part of it as well. And that's what I think makes Eastern Kentucky basketball so special, is that you have these connections, you meet these people, and when you meet them, they're just regular, everyday people, but when I met them, especially King Kelly, EA Couch, some of these other people, I mean, these are people that you looked up to. You wanted to be like, when you were little, you wanted to accomplish the things.
Superstars. I mean,
and they just treat you like, you're just one of them. You're just a regular person. They're a regular person, and they don't think anything special about themselves. And I think that's what made them special. They accomplished these great things, and they did it without getting cocky, without getting the big head, so to speak. And I don't think they really realized what they did for basketball, and I'll say Eastern Kentucky, but what they did for basketball in the state. I think a lot of these small schools that have won, Carr Creek, especially Inez, and even Paintsville in the 1990s when I played. I think that's what makes basketball special in Kentucky. I mean, we only have one state champion. I think we might be the only state, or we're one of two, that only have one state champion in basketball. And I think you can trace it to these small schools, because every once in a while, one of these small schools comes out of the mountains and they end up winning a state championship, and it's really special.
Yeah, that's something special. That's what I was saying. I mean, it's very well, and even if you want to throw the underdog story in there, a small school coming up and competing with the bigger schools and winning a title is always a good story.
And it's like the movie Hoosiers, right? I mean, everybody loves the movie Hoosiers if you're a sports fanatic, right? I mean, Hickory Huskers, right? And I'll tell you what, it's pretty awesome to live that story, as the underdog small school that, takes on all these big schools and wins a state championship. It's pretty awesome. It's something that I would definitely recommend for kids because it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah. That's a lot of good information about Carr Creek. Again, there's 2 books I believe that Don Miller has written. The Carr Creek Legacy is one of them, and then the Overtime. I think it's is it the Overtime Kids maybe?
Overtime Kids, yes.
Yeah, that's another one. I've not read that one, but both those are pretty good. There's a good amount of information you can get online if you want to look it up. We here at the Kentucky History Channel are in the process of getting some footage of the old games. Like we said, you know, TV and video and stuff of that time can be a little bit more difficult to get a hold of. But we're going to try to put together a little documentary as well about Carr Creek and just those national title games and so forth. I agree, though, with JR. King Kelly Coleman might be another episode in itself to talk about. Pretty interesting a guy from Eastern Kentucky, an extremely talented basketball player to talk about as well. So anything else before we sign off here?
No, man, I thought it was great to talk about Carr Creek. I had a blast, and I hope everybody understands my love for Carr Creek, just because of, what they mean, not only to me, but, to a generation of basketball players from the mountains. I'm sure they inspired other players and other players.
Other places, not even in Eastern Kentucky. I mean,
I'm sure other places, schools. If you were from a small school, you heard the story of Carr Creek. Just because, in 1928, they had 18 boys in the whole school, and they accomplished, what they did. And then to do it, to win a state title in 1956 with probably not many more boys in the school. And so, if you played basketball, and if you still play basketball, and it's a small high school, you're going to hear about Carr Creek because everybody knows that story.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of counties, and this might be a little off topic, but a lot of counties, they consolidated schools and so forth. And a lot of those smaller school history is gone. I think of like in Rockcastle County, like the big story, one of the biggest stories that you always heard was the time that Rockcastle County beat Clay County. Oh, no, not Rockcastle County. Sorry, Broadhead beat Clay County in the 70s, I believe, to go to the state championship or to the state tournament. I mean, they just won the region, but it's one of the biggest stories is like when the last time that Rockcastle had went to the state championship was in the 70s when Clayton Cash was the starting. My cousin Clayton Cash was the starting point guard, or I believe he's point guard. They beat Clay County, went to the state tournament. It's this big ordeal. Clay County, of course, was super angry, and their fans were very mad, as one would expect.
Hey, Clay County was a powerhouse then. That's that typical David and Goliath story, right there.
And then you talk about generational too, because not till his son Aaron, which is he's the same age as me, but he got to high school, and Rockcastle won the region and went back to the state tournament. That was that. And that, I mean, they talk about generational. That was a complete father to son transition there. But that's a side story. You can find those, and that's one thing I'm very interested in. I don't know if we'll find one as compelling as Carr Creek, because Carr Creek, I mean, it's special. It's a special little.
It is, man.
Place and a story.
It is, and it's that, like you said, it's that small school going up against the big schools. And when you look against the teams that they played in the state tournament, Central City, Allen County, Wayland was a small school as well. And so that was two small schools playing against each other. Henderson was a huge school. And so, to be able to do the things that they did, I mean, it almost mirrors like when these other small schools win, so, Painesville in 1996, for example, we had to beat Owensboro, which is a fairly large school. Allen County Just like Carr Creek, we had to play Allen County Scottsville, another big school. Lexington Catholic, which was a powerhouse as well. And then Ashland, we had to play Ashland in the state finals, just like Carr Creek did in the 20s. And so, it's that people love that underdog story, man. They love the underdog story, the David and Goliath thing, it's almost, I'd say in every county in the state, there's probably a story or more than one story about those schools doing that. And it's always basketball related, which makes it so much special.
So that's one thing. Maybe some point we'll be able to get around to cover all those big stories and all those counties that basketball related and history related to. But sports history is a part of history just as much as Daniel Boone and Simon Kenton and all those people rolling in here. And we definitely want to kind of cover it all as much as we can, So without anything else, JR, thanks for coming on. We'll do it again, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. Any last words?
No, man, I just appreciate you having me on. It was great to talk about this history. Can't wait to do it again.
Yep. Well, with that all being said, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/KYHistoryPod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're always seeking to find more Kentucky history so we can bring it to you. The viewers, the listeners, we want all the stories and all the events from Kentucky's great history to be told and shared everywhere.